Okay, welcome to today's Kaipara District Council briefing for Wednesday, the 7th of August, 2024. We have a number of items to get through today, and our first one is an external presenter, Bronda Smith, Magnify New Zealand. It's a review of revenue and financing policy for the annual plan. Bronda.
Thank you.
Sue.
Thank you. Yeah.
So before you start, Sue, can I just say, elected members, item number 3 on the agenda we won't be doing today, and item number 10 will defer to another item another day as well, just so you're aware. Sorry, Sue and Bronda.
So just if I could segment two, I'll be leaving at about 2 o'clock.
Leaving on a jet plane.
Yeah.
I feel like leaving too.
Okay. That's okay. So you recall during deliberations for the LTP that the council has asked that we review the revenue and financing policy, particularly the area of capital value versus land value. And we take an in-depth look at that and do quite a bit of modelling on that area. In order to do that, we have to look at we have to go through a process, and you have to do the stage 1 first. So some of this will seem like repetition because we've been through this in the last 18 months, but we want to get at least stage 1 done today. Then we'll look at stage 2, because it's not just about CVs and LVs, it's about looking at the differentials, potentially the UAGC, and potentially remissions that you might need to soften any outliers that we find during the process. But there'll be quite a lot of modelling done, but it's not today. This is just step 1. So I'll hand over to Bronda. She's done this process with a number of councils, and and so brings a wealth of experience. So that's why she's.
You come up today from somewhere else, Rhonda?
I have.
You don't live in the district. Oh.
I don't.
Whereabouts did you go?
Hey,
Oh,
Look north.
Oh, thank you for coming. I hope you had a good trip up.
I did. Thank you very much. So thanks and welcome to the light and airy and fluffy part of council, which is rates. I know that's my joke went probably a little bit flat, but rates can sometimes be a little bit dry, and unfortunately it is one of the places where councils can get themselves into the most strife. There's probably the most number of litigations in the last 10 years have been around.
You obviously weren't here this morning.
That's taken to High Court, unfortunately, and Supreme Court, which is where Wairoa's ended up. So that side of things is we just need to make sure that we get the process right. And unfortunately, that means that there are some stuff that we have to go through, and today is one of those. We know that you've been through this before, so we're trying to keep this at a high level, really just a quick review to make sure that there's nothing that, considering what we're looking at changing, that would be any different. So we'll whip through stage 1, and then we want to talk about stage 2, which is where you do the overall impact. So stage 1 is all about activities in their own right. So that's the individual activities, and then stage 2 looks at the overall impact. And the overall impact is where you start talking about things like CV and LV, which Sue mentioned, differentials, how do you use the UAGC, looking at affordability, what does that mean? You know, where are those outliers in that process? Where's the impact? If we pull one edge of our spider web, which is what I like to call it, it's a spider web rating. You pull one corner and the whole thing goes out of shape. So what do we need to do to make sure that we keep that constant? So I've put up a quick couple of slides. This is really just really high level around where the revenue and financing policy sits in the LTP. It's that middle process. So your finance strategy sets out your overall financial direction. The revenue and financing policy then says, well, how are we going to get paid for? So that's the bit there. And then the funding impact statement is your yearly rating process that says, okay, this is how much rates are going to be based on what was said in our revenue and financing policy. So those are the stages of where it sits and what it looks like. So if you just want to go to the next slide. So this is, we're talking about stage 1 at the moment. We'll talk about stage 2 at the end of the conversation. Stage 1, as I said, is about each of the activities, and then the overall discussion. Yeah. Stage 1. That's the outcomes that we're looking for. What are the exacerbators? Who benefits from it? All of those usual things that are part of section 101, 1013A. which is part of the revenue and financing policy. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a bit of a read of this beforehand, because I'm not going to go through all of that. Then the next one, which is step 2. This is the bit that we'll probably have a bit of a conversation out and come back to it at the end when we're talking about what you want out of stage 2. So that is, what outcomes do we have to look at? How do we make sure that we've got the overall impact across the community appropriate? And we've talked about 2 possible timeframes. And those timeframes are pretty tight. One, when we first talked about the timing of it, was going out and consulting in December. Now, there was a bit of pushback from the ELT. I totally understand why that is. December consultations are not that easy. And so we did another one where we looked at November. That might mean that there is a little bit of extra council briefings to be able to make sure that we can get through that process and do the work that we need to for stage 2, to be able to make sure that we hit that November timeline. So it really does come back to council as to if we're wanting to hit November, then that means there might be a few extra briefings, and as long as we're happy with that, then we can make that work.
So at the moment, we're really planning that that Rhonda, if she does stage 1 today, then you'll spend a lot of time on stage 2 in the September early briefing and the October early briefing, and then come to council for adoption to go out to consultation. And the reason why we want to do consultation prior to the long-term plan is because of the fact we want to use this year's figures with what the changes would be to those figures, not use the new annual plan figures so people get confused as your figures are changing. That makes sense.
So the recommendation around consultation on revenue and financing policies is really, if you're doing a significant change, which LV to CV will be, you don't do that at the same time as you're trying to talk about budgets, because it's really hard to have a conversation about changes in your revenue and financing policy and your rates policy, as well as budgets at the same time, because they get them completely mixed up. So what I found in the past is the best way to do it is go back and say, this is what you paid last year. This is what you would have paid if we had it in the new system. They can see what they paid, this is what it would have paid, and they make it clear, and it's not got any of the budget changes in it whatsoever. You make that change, and then when you come to do the consultation on the annual plan, if you're going to consult, which of course you might not have to, you're already done and dusted. You've already made the decision about how you're charging, and all you're doing is looking at budgets and talking about budgets rather than trying to talk about 2 things at once. So it is recommended not to do the 2 things at the same time.
So all I'll do is just add to that and say that in the slides, I see there's a different time frame to what I put on my paper.
If you go to the next one.
Oh, right.
The next one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Next slide.
The next
I have
has
got
got November. So there's the 2 different timeframes, and that's where there's the extra briefings in there outside of normal council briefings to make sure that we can get through the process, because really it comes back to how often and what changes you want to make. And we'll know a bit more of that hopefully at the end of this conversation to see what you actually want to have a look at.
So Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Rhonda. I'm looking forward to this. Have you had any districts or any councils that have gone into this process and then as a result of all this reverted back to the existing rate space?
Yes and no. So yes, in the fact that part of it they decided not to do, but part of it they decided to do. So, for example, a UAGC talking about using separately used or inhabited parts versus rating units, they decided to stick with the status quo, which was rating units rather than going to separate used or inhabited parts. Some people have gone through the conversation about CV and LV and have stuck with LV because of the political environment rather than the conversation about what's the fairest way to do it.
Can I come in there? So when they did that, they went, obviously we had to go to council for a decision. They end up simply going back because they couldn't get a majority of support or?
The count, I think it was agreed at the point in time that the, I'm trying to be, there was a very big rural base and that rural base wanted it to stay at land value. And so ultimately that's where it's at.
Right.
So it came back to the fact that they went out and consulted. The information that they got back was, we want to stay where we are. So the council decided at that point to stay where they were.
Okay.
So that can tend to be the issue in where it sits. The bit and so we'll talk about that when we get to the end, about what you're really wanting to achieve out of this process. And probably with the understanding that Sue's given me, it's not around the activity. We've left this at a really high level. It's the step 2 changes that you're wanting to make. So we've tried to make sure that we've got as much time for that as possible.
So three, Mr. Mayor, if I can, so there's 2 slides there that Ron's gone through about the consultation side of things. I believe the best approach is to consult 1st of November to 15th of December. I don't believe consulting over December and January is smart in this district. But to do that, when you need to commit to the timeframes that we need to deliver this work, and that's as per the schedule on that slide. So that's what we're seeking. Also, the next item we're talking about is the representation review, obviously, that's fine, keeping as well. There'll be additional briefings around that. So I'm just signalling that there is a workload ahead and you've asked for this work. We need that commitment to deliver it.
About the district plan as well.
There's also the district plan. There's probably a lot of it.
Aiming for about November, but I think the going will probably be December.
Well, hopefully it's not.
Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Mayer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, my comments are that I think we have to and should just get on with it and get it done as you're suggesting. In the context of that though, and I think Mark raises a relevant point here with the district plan, we're going to have to go through some briefings on that at some point.
Out and notified.
Did it notify?
Into the consultation process through the
Yes.
Submissions period.
But so we've got that and we've got representation review, and that's happening soon, the representation review, so that should be relatively straightforward. My only comment in terms of your schedule that you've got in the agenda here is that we'll always try to keep January clear because we're going at the moment and we'll have that block of time.
Yep.
I know it says the end of January, we can make it the beginning of February, just gives us a break. Probably won't make a lot of difference.
Because there'll be something else that'll come along.
Well, there might be, but you know.
Yeah. So you're saying there, move that to the early February?
Early February.
I agree. I agree.
So,
Second to last item, early.
Yes, the deliberations, yes.
Did you have a question, Ash?
yeah, I just wanted to know, can you tell us the key areas where you would like to look at? Like you mentioned a couple, but maybe we can look at what is the most important area we'd like it to do, rather than with the whole shebang.
So you get one opportunity with the revenue and financing policy. So really it comes, if you're wanting to make those changes, you probably need to look at everything that you're wanting to look at. This part today is really a check-in, and there's a couple of things that we want to talk about, which has been brought up, which is about stormwater. The majority of the things that we've got at the moment on today's, when we come to the end and we have a conversation around what we're wanting to do as part of step 2 considerations, I have put some suggestions in there about some things that you might want to look at. And I know there's some things that LVCV is a conversation that we want to have a look at as well. So maybe if I get into it and then when we come back to the section 2 part, we can talk about that high level areas as well.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so definitely just November then, we've got that locked in. We've had the commitment and we're on our way.
Yep.
Brilliant, okay. Keep going, I'm going to go straight into the next one, so we'll come back to that one. Okay, So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through each of these pages relatively quickly. I know you've been through these before. There's a couple of changes that we've made on some of these pages, which are already basically in the document, but to make it clearer for the reader and to give for there to be a really good understanding, we've moved some of that out of the heading at the beginning, which where I've got a line through there that says actuals may vary plus or minus 10%, which is quite a big variation for some things. I've actually gone through and put the variation into each of them with a 5% on either side of the actual target. So the target for the first one is really, and I might have this slide, open target for reserves and open spaces. It's towards that 100% end. We don't make a lot of fees and charges out of that, but really to give ourselves, because it's almost impossible to get that exactly budgeted right. I've yet to find a council that have got their targets on perfect target. We just give yourselves a little bit of space to be able to say, okay, we're going to make somewhere between 0 and 5%. The rest of it, we're actually going to make out of general rates.
It's entirely
target
public
rates.
benefit, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah. So what we're doing with reserves and open spaces, we've got a targeted rate that has been set in the last LTP review for parks and gardens and reserves. So that's a targeted rate of 95 to 100. So that's benefited to specific people within the community, and 0 to 5 are fees and charges. So I've made those adjustments on the way through. So I've put those in red so you can tell them and what they look like. So nothing there. You've already been through that one. You've talked about that last time, not looking at making any changes.
Sorry, may I just?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bron, on that one, you say under parks and reserves, you've got fees and charges, 0 to 5%. I'm trying to, and maybe the brain's frazzled at the moment. I can't think what fees and charges we'd have related to parks.
There might be when people hire, so through the chair, there might be when people hire the spaces in the park for, I don't know, bouncy castles or anything else there might be that they come to us for.
Okay, so that's a revenue projection, you're 0 to 5, so we might get 5%.
Possibly, if you.
The cafe out at Maz, would that be paying a rental?
The mayor's.
Yes, it will be, the cafe will to Maz, but most of those might be under our either community, there's a community activity, or there's a strategic property, there's a
I was just trying to think of examples.
yeah.
So that's the standard, is where you might have Irish fees from sports teams that are using a ground on a Wednesday night for, and they might pay a minimal Irish fee, or any of those sort of bits and pieces. But what we're doing by giving you that 0 to 5% is it's probably going to be closer to 0 in reality, because the fees that you charge are normally enough just for them to give us a bit of money back. It's not around, you're not charging it to make money. It's around a coverage of costs. So the reason that we put 0 to 5% is to say there's a bit of a return. It's not 100% targeted rate. We are expecting a little bit, but in the revenue and financing policy, if you don't say that you've got any form of revenue, then technically you're not allowed to charge the fees and charge at all. So what we're trying to do is.
So it's mitigating.
It's mitigate. If you're putting out a fee and a charge for hiring out a piece of park, then you have to have it in your revenue and financing policy that you can do that.
Even if you don't do it.
Even if you don't do it.
Okay, councillor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just see that the person preparing this table had a sense of humour, because we have cemeteries and as activity, and the community outcome is vibrant communities.
I'll take that back to LTP discussion.
Bury the right people, you might.
I've got a short list.
I did,
Get back to
I did say that the fluffy and light side of council. So, yeah. So any questions from that side, from that one, other than explaining where we were sitting? So with cemeteries, there are 65 to 75% fees and charges, which is your burial fees, your selling of plots, and general rates 25 to 35%, which covers, you can't, the remaining costs that you can't actually charge for plots, etc.
Sorry, could I just chip in, your worship? I was trying to multitask and failed with regard to the particular fees and charges for birds and open spaces. Could you, if you haven't already covered that, could you tell me which charges?
So it would be something around, like you charge hireage of a sports park for a function or a festival, or bouncy castles, hireage from a team who might be using it on a Wednesday night to practice.
Do we have any of those things in the fees and charges?
So there's two parts to it. You possibly do, you possibly might not, but unless you have it in your revenue and financing policy that you can charge those, you can't at all.
Yeah, so we probably, as default, go zero. And
Yeah.
then something on a higher out bouncy castles.
Something might come up.
But without having your fees and charges schedules in front of me, if I'm looking at possibly someone around the room who might be able to look up, we've got fees and charges for a, no, someone's.
We do.
Have we got fees and charges, do you know, Lainey, for our park spaces?
There are some concessions and things like that, but I don't quite know where they put what.
Okay, yeah,
Then we do charge leases.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, we have had some different things in our
Yeah.
parks at times. So that's why we just, but it's nothing on a regular basis.
So hence the, what I was saying before with the ability to have a 0 to 5 means that you can charge some, but it's probably not going to be a significant amount. And the 5% just gives you a margin to work with it. So what you'll probably find is it's probably more towards the 100% for targeted rates, but we're taking into account that you would have received some money in the past, will continue to budget a bit of money in the future. But if you don't have it in your revenue and financing policy, you can't create any fees and charges at all.
She's gone. Oh, free for all.
Behind you.
Actually, at the end of the day, and it's interesting that you've split out, you reference sports parks, split out sports. And, I see how all that, potentially comes together, but I don't know all of our parks, but, some of them are under separate LTOs. But I don't think any are really controlled by trusts or anything like that at the moment, except perhaps Sportsville. So revenue, what I'm trying to get at is that if there was a trust operating this area, they would take the fees. So does this give them the right to charge them a fee?
So what this would do would allow you from that trust to receive a rental for, I'm without knowing your fees and charges to the nth degree.
Which would be a peppercorn.
Which would be a peppercorn lease
Yep.
to be able to run that sports park. The trust would then decide what revenue they would charge for the park.
So the question is, and so you probably won't know it, how many of our parks are operated, and probably sports parks are operated by a trust?
I don't think there's many at all. I think it's, I don't even know if that's our land. Okay,
It is, yeah.
What about museums?
so when we'll have to,
This is reserves and open spaces, so I would
Yeah.
imagine that museums are a separate item, if cemeteries are.
we haven't got them in it because we don't fund museums at the moment. Okay, so it's a minimal fees and charges. You're not talking much money, and that's all she's saying.
Yep.
Move on to cemeteries. Otherwise we'll need more lights and for more meetings.
So there are some things we can come back to you and let you know if you've got some, because this does, revenue and finances do answer some, create some questions.
Yep.
Because it makes you think, well, what are we doing with those spaces from a council's point of view? How are we utilising those spaces? So there's ultimately some information that we can provide in that space. So Lainey, if someone can start taking some questions down.
Yep.
Then we can answer those and bring that information back to you.
Sorry, would we get a copy of the current policy with, so we can mull through and see what are the possible changes we look at?
So this is the current policy as part of it.
Policy as it,
This is apart from so this part is, I've pulled out of the current policy.
Is all stage one.
Is all stage one. The stage two part of the policy we'll talk about secondly.
this is the only.
This is the part that we're talking about at the moment.
Entire-
Second part we'll have as part of the full policy. Yeah.
No, I don't know what is the policy currently on, this timeline is there. For example, you pick anything, what's the current policy? We don't know, like Councillor Howard mentioned about, do we charge and we don't know, is it our land or whatever? I would like to see the whole policy.
So that wouldn't be in this policy. So that's not part of what this policy is. That policy would be in your Parks and Recs management plan as to what you're going to do with those parks, how you're going to charge fees. All this does is allows you to create that revenue.
Yeah.
And then you would say, okay, well, if we're going to do that, what can we do with these parks and what changes could we make? So that's a separate conversation.
Okay.
So this is really about who's going to pay. Are we going to collect the money by fees? And in some instances, like our parks, there's not much opportunity to do that. And it's whether the general rate payer should be paying or or starting to look at, some targeted rates or fees and charges. That's all you're looking at today.
Yeah.
Can we move on to cemeteries?
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, look, ultimately, from that point of view, it is the space that does answer questions, and it'll get faster as we go through because we'll be answering those, we hope. We'll be answering those questions as you go. So cemeteries, we sort of talked about that most of that comes from fees and charges because we charge for plots and we charge for, crematoriums and all those sort of bits and pieces. The rest we're actually saying comes through from the general rates. Sports parks, once again, the same as we had for reserves and open spaces. That probably would have been split out previously. And so that's 0 to 5% fees and charges and 95 to 100 for the targeted rates. If we go to the next page. Campgrounds at the moment are actually reducing your general rate.
Yeah.
So we make money out of the campgrounds. And that reduces your general rate as part of the process at the moment.
Primarily, that's the Kaiwi Lakes.
Yeah.
The other one,
Others don't.
the other ones, we got rid of the cost there.
We get some lease in to mitigate the costs.
Yeah.
But the only one that really is Kaiwi. That makes
So I've put a question mark there for general rates because in reality, what we're doing is paying back. If there is no expectation in the future that we would be getting any form of general rate to pay for the campgrounds, I'd look to probably take that line out altogether and just say it's fees and charges.
Councillor Vincent?
Yeah, how would, like capital funding, when we've got to do, like capital works on a campground,
Yep.
we've got the operational costs covered and operational income coming into the council as a net benefit. But we need new toilets or whatever, and we haven't got any grants from elsewhere. Is that something that should be paid by rates? As that's what it's showing with borrowing is in effect coming from rates, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, so I agree with Bronda that we should probably take the general rates out and just leave it as the borrowing.
Yeah.
That's what we do for capital projects or from some kind of reserves.
And the repayment of that borrowing would come out of the fees and charges that you've got coming from,
Have the revenue from.
out of the revenue from the actual campgrounds themselves.
So that would be ring fenced.
That would be ring fenced as part of that and be used to pay back for that. So that's what we tend to do with a lot of those is where that fees and charges have come in specifically for an area. It would pay the costs of that area first, and then it would go back to reduce your general rates. If we needed to borrow some money to put some more toilets in, the money that would be made from the campgrounds would be used to pay that money back first, and then the balance of it would go back to the general rate.
Thank you.
So are we making a change there to Well, we've got
I think we take that general rates out because we're not actually, and unless you can see that being particularly different in the future. And I'm talking, not immediate, but medium term, because you review this every 3 years, and in 3 years' time, it might be different. Then we'll take the general rates out because we're not using it. It's really 100% fees and charges.
Well, I mean, whilst I respect that this is not a meeting for decisions, the simple fact here is that I'm trying to think is that with the camping grounds that we've got going to private enterprise, how many, we've got Mangawhai, well, that's under separate lease, so are there many more? I mean.
Yes, we do. We have Bailey's Beach.
Yeah.
Glinks.
And Glinks Bay.
And Kelly's Bay. So there's quite a number of them.
Kelly's Bay going to private enterprise?
That's going to private enterprise.
Under KDC.
Yeah. So
I mean, we're not talking about a lot of camping grounds here, but we still have in the foreseeable future some under our control that we need to allow this cover. Okay, that's all I want to clarify.
Yeah, it's definitely activity that councillors, until you sell them all, you need to have an activity in your revenue and financing policy. So community assistance, that's 100% operational funding. Would you get any grants and subsidies for anything in that space? Is the one?
yes, because that would be where we get, we've just gone through a round of it.
Communities and stuff.
Yeah, all the,
Okay.
not COGS, no, but it's the ones you're giving out grants for, because that's what it is, that we,
Oh,
sometimes we get grants in and that we give out.
Right, so if you're getting grants money, I'll add grants money into that because ultimately otherwise you don't have the opportunity to say that you're going to get grants that you will then pay out. So add grants to that if you are receiving.
Yeah, an award grants committee.
Yeah.
To the operations part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you get creative funding grants and some of those, okay, then that needs to be in there. We'll add that in. Yep. Libraries, I've got 0 to 2% there, and I popped that in because you do things like photocopying and some of that stuff, which previously was at 0. And then also targeted rates for 98 to 100. So it really just takes into account that you are getting a little bit of money in from the libraries. And then pensioner housing, which I would normally suggest is a ring-fenced amount that the fees and charges, it's within its own bucket. So we don't use any general rates or any targeted rates to pop that up. So it's all fees and
We
charges.
try not to.
So we've got 4 of those, haven't we? We've got 2 in Darrell, 1 in Rua, one here. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when we say try not to,
Well, at the moment in Mangawhai, I think we may not be meeting the revenue because of the fact that we've got a number of houses there that are unoccupied. Or
Right,
maybe that's just the, so I'm not sure if the rent we're getting in is covering the expenditure.
We're having to maintain the whole area where only
Yeah, the whole area
is occupied.
occupied, yeah. So there could be
So is it worthwhile therefore adding in fees and charges 100% and you've got really a fallback position, at least for short-term general rates?
yeah, I've just put general rates in a question mark,
Okay,
just to see how much we're actually looking at propping that up at the moment, and then we can add a percentage in there.
it may only be up to 5%.
Yeah.
It's a very small percentage.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good.
And we can come back to the numbers and know what the LTP's done for that as well.
Yep.
In which case then we'll need to add that back into here. So I've got that written down now. Yes. And so now we move into the regulatory function. Animal control, 15 to 25% general rates, 85% targeted rate, fees and charges. Sorry, something cut off.
Okay.
Funding,
Yeah, it says financial,
okay, depreciation reserves. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was in there.
yeah, from way.
I'll just go back down a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think, oh, yeah.
Yeah, we lose it at the bottom of the,
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
can
it's
see it
cut
on,
off.
you can see it on the screen. So I've just
Oh,
put it
go
on the screen.
back, if we just go back one, let's go one back.
Oh, maybe not.
it doesn't,
No.
it stays on the other.
Okay, somehow
It
it's
was
been,
there.
You got it here, so what is it? Yeah, no, you're cut off too, though.
okay. Find out what it is, 'cause I've got the actual policy. It's not come up on the policy.
Shouldn't be.
Campground. Just these operations funding, fees and charges, 80%, general rates,
And then borrowing.
borrowing, yeah.
Capital is, so that's it, all there is here, is it? Fund.
Yeah, just is borrowing.
Yeah.
Because the only capital we're going to have there is we build dog premises.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you using, are you funding depreciation for that? Just put depreciation reserves there just in case.
Yes, it probably
Okay.
will be.
Okay.
Yeah, we've only just started because we've only just, we,
Only just built.
yeah,
Because we've got some assets
Yeah.
in there. Okay.
You would need a depreciation reserve from that, so I'll pop that in as well. If you've only just built it, then that would be why it's probably not the underpass.
Yeah. Okay? Good.
Okay, so if we just go to building control, that's
Yeah.
70 to 80, and 20 to 30 general rates, is 70 to 80 from, as a building control.
Is 70 to 80% considered a benchmark? Or are we higher or lower?
I'd say on average, you're a little bit lower than most councils. Most councils tend to run that a bit higher. The bit that you can't, there's a little bit of a juggling act in that space, and the fact that you need to have a BCA for a district. You absolutely have to have a BCA for a district. So there is some costs involved in making sure that you've got a BCA there. The bit that I would suggest is that, Building Control Authority. No, that's okay, please,
You beat
I've
me.
been around councils for way too long and I say all the acronyms, so if you don't understand them, please to ask. So that would probably be on the lower end of the realm. We can come back and provide some information as part of stage 2, because you get a second opportunity to look at these numbers.
So that you understand though, we have a building compliance team, so there's quite a lot, it's not just one person, some councils only have one person. Because of all the growth, and if people ring us up and say, is this legal? You know, and so we have to have a number of officers looking at those, and you get no money in from that, basically.
If it's complying, then there is no basis for charging. a fee.
No,
Yes, that's right.
and so you've got to have an inquiry facility.
Yeah, so we do, and you do have a lot even in, under your building control. You know, technical processing, people will ring up and you can't, it's all part of the building process, and they might not end up building a house.
Yeah.
Right, who's BCA? Is there someone BCA in the background? No, okay.
Cool.
Are you happy with that? That's,
Yep,
Well,
I can bring some information and
I would raise the query of whether we have the capacity to increase the fees and charges to, say, 75 to 85%, you know. It takes that little bit of pressure off general rates.
But in theory, we can have whatever rate of percentage return that we decide, because we could decide that we actually reverse the numbers because we want to be demonstrating how we are encouraging people to apply for building.
Take it at the other end, get the new rates, take.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I mean, that's the discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the conversation around council table of what's your first philosophy? If your first philosophy is the person who gets the most benefit should pay the most, well then from a building control authority, that is the person that's getting the building consent.
Yep.
So, which is why most councils would push that. That it would be, you know, I've seen councils up around, if you look at places like Tauranga, which are a growth council, that's more like 95%, because ultimately building consent should be paying their way. But in smaller and more rural councils, you tend to find that split can't be that hard, because you just don't have the same number of consents happening. But we can bring back some information around what that might be able to be.
If you can, Rhonda, that'd be good, because, I take your last point on rural councils, which I guess we consider rural council, are we still below the benchmark?
Yep.
Thank you.
We bring that back. And resource consents, that's normally would have, a bit of work based in there on, compliance as well. So you tend not to be able to get that to that higher level. So that 65 to 75 is probably around about right. But once again, I'll look at those two together at the same time.
Yep.
Environmental health, that's primarily, I've got to read these right, don't I?
Your food safety, sale of liquor.
Sorry. So fees and charges for liquor is 100%, sorry, at the bottom. And then environmental health is 25 to 35% for general rates and 65 to 75 for fees and charges.
I think it's around.
Is it around the other way? Have I got that? Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Read it, yeah. Fees and charges 25 to 35. General rates 65 to 75.
Has that been transposed when it's been typed up or?
Yeah, it must be.
Because that seems quite.
Yeah, the environmental health though, there is a lot of work that is not able to be charged for because you are doing a lot of inspections and some of those. But look, let me double check that. Have you got the original? Because while we're talking, because I'll make sure I do have that right.
Again, there's the public good element.
Yes, yeah, environmental health, liquor, totally, 100%. Let's say
Well,
you should be able to recover all of that, but the
No,
environmental health is
Because
different.
the fees are set by central government and they haven't been adjusted for inflation. If you were to talk to the chairman of local government. New
Yeah,
Zealand.
environmental health 70.
Yeah.
So general rates.
Right, so I did have that right, 65 to 75 for general rates,
Yep,
25 to 35
yeah,
for fees and charges.
yeah,
But that is correct.
That is correct.
yeah.
I could put the question the other way. Are we managing to cover the cost of liquor licensing out of this separate fees which are being charged?
Yes, we do. For liquor licensing, we do, not for food and health.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you would normally have to report on that as part of your compliance for your annual report as to where you sit for your revenue and financing policy. So regulatory monitoring, 75 to 85 general rates and 15 to 25% for fees and charges. Parking.
Change that.
Parking, question, it should be the other way around. Parking should essentially be self-funded, isn't it?
There's not much, so that was one I looked at, and the only parking we have in the district is Dargaville.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment, all the,
Let's get some wardens out.
Where you have the money.
yeah, but we don't, they're actually they do a number of things, not, so we don't just have one parking warden. But when they do go out, they don't always get the fines. I mean, and it's very infrequent. So I'm not even sure if that's big enough to call it an activity, because it is only in Dargaville.
I would suggest it's not an activity. Personally, living in Dargaville. Parking.
Well,
It's a real issue.
can't fund them.
And it's completely infrequent.
So what do you want us to do there? I mean, you obviously want us to have, to attend and have, more walking the streets. But, I still think there are issues with funding at 100% because a lot of the time there might only be one or two.
You wouldn't be able to fund it 100%. I think just what we were commenting is it's a shame it's not the other way around.
Okay.
Councillor Larson.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that I don't see any point in throwing a whole lot of money at parking wardens. It's going to cost the ratepayer more than can be recovered in penalties, and then I feel for the people in Dargaville having to pay the penalties that we're trying to extract to fund them, so.
And that's a perfect LTP annual plan conversation.
Do you want us to fine you more wardens?
Well, if I may,
Repeat.
it's Mayor, at the DCDB meeting last night, the one thing that they were asking for was more parking over there. So, you know, there will be opportunities to extract more money.
I was talking to our good CE about this matter the other day. Contentious many councils, other than Mary Woods, of course, than the issue of parking.
Parking, yep.
And,
Go with dogs.
well, that's another big one.
Dogs.
But the thing was, you know, we might be in a position where we're forced to look at some parking issues like down at the Surf Club.
Yep.
Apple, because I know that I had a local ring me up who's a keen surfer. He said in Australia, they have to put parking meters in because people just park and
Park there all day.
on the beach.
Yep.
So, you know, we've got a problem here.
Absolutely.
Space.
No parking in Mungfine.
No, exactly.
It's,
Something we have to, something we do have to look at.
but the biggest issue in Dargaville is if people parked where they should park all day, you would have the parking.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm always asking for.
that came through last night.
Okay, so what we'll do is leave parking in there because there will be more parking in the future.
Yep.
Especially when we've done the concept plan. And we've got the service delivery manager here who'll be looking at his team and getting them out there to manage the parking in Dargaville. Okay, so we're on to the next one.
So I'm just conscious, sorry, I'll just bring this up now, is that we've got about half an hour left. We've got a few more to go through.
Yeah.
Do you want to come back and finish this off at a later stage and have the number 2 conversation now? Because I'm just conscious I've only got half an hour.
Look, I think we're pretty stretched out today with what's happened. I think coming back would be a good thing. What do you think, Jason?
I want to have that number 2 questions.
I think we should put it through.
Through to the second part of the conversation.
Yep.
Get from Sue Thursday.
So what I think is that it's not as bad as what Rhonda thinks, because she doesn't understand we've got these, there's probably about 10 things, but the very last ones are all specific targeted rates from the harbour restoration CCTV. And they're basically, the public have asked us for those rates. So they're basically no change for the last 4. So you probably have got, okay, we'll just see.
The last one.
I want to talk about number 2s.
Yep.
Do we need to finish our number 1s first though?
Councillor Larson, you want to ask?
Please don't do neither right now. I just want to ask a question. I probably missed something again. I'm a little bit slow.
That's okay.
Tiffany. This is in red that you've got there. So these are sort of starting from the ground, or are you showing something different from what you're currently doing, or how does this?
So what we had at the beginning was there was a plus or minus 10%. What I've done for readability for the users, so they don't have to keep going and backing and understanding what that is put the range of what was there, plus or minus 5%, to keep it within the document itself. So the target for most of these is halfway between that. So the target point for council was, for example, for parks was 80% and 20%. So it's now 75 to 85 and 15 to 25. So it's bringing the information back out of the heading and into that document itself.
Thank you.
So sorry, just extension of that, through the chair. I mean, ideally, as I mentioned before, we should have this chart with what is now. And then we should probably have a workshop of our own to decide that, rather than taking your time and come back with the solution of what figures you would like to see.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we've got an expert here. We need to take us through this process. So we will
But
do.
we can't decide on the spot for each item.
So this has already been decided.
Yeah,
This was decided 18 months ago.
updates.
This is really just an update to make sure that we're touching base on where we were so that we can get to the section 2 conversation. So my understanding as part of the review was that this had already been worked through with council. This is really not where council wants to spend the time, that council wants to spend the time section in number 2, but we have to do this as part of the process.
You've done this and you actually adopted it last week.
Yeah.
Okay, so
this
it's a separate policy, so no surprise.
So this bit is purely a review so that we can get to the second part.
So let's go. Here we go. We'll give ourselves another 15 minutes and then reassess.
Okay, I'll give it let's say 10 and then we'll go for it. So stormwater drainage, this is the area we do want to have a conversation about. At the moment, we have targeted rates which are not
Equalised.
harmonised,
Yeah.
equalised.
So what we do is we add together all the operating costs and then all the capital costs actually go to the different areas. So we're suggesting for stormwater that there's, we look at whether we should bring them together and look at, and what we'll do is bring back to you next time the rates that we charge for each area and what it would be like if it was smoothed. So we're smoothing operating, but not capital. Whereas in water and wastewater, we've done equalisation of everything. But at the time, we do stormwater when we did the equalisation. So we're saying, do we want to look at that? It's a small thing, but it's just something we'll bring back to you next time to look at.
Yeah.
Okay? Other than that, it's basically 90%, 10% is the, and you probably need to put a range in there.
Yeah, that one's probably slightly different because that would be an absolute
Oh,
calculator.
yeah, it would be, yeah,
So you don't have a range from outside.
okay?
So that's this, yeah, so no change with stormwater. Water supply is the same as it was. Fees and charges 0 to 5 because that will be for any water connections, etc. And then target water and with water meters for 95 to 100. That connectability is 75 of full, that's actually a funding impact statement decision. So I've crossed that out because you wouldn't normally put that in your revenue and financing policy. Water and wastewater, not looking to say any change there, except for that we've got the fees and charges are 0 to 5. So once again, connection charges, and then the balance of whatever's left over is 5% general rate, 95% targeted rate.
Yeah.
So I've put balance in there so it's obvious that's whatever's left over from the fees and charges. Roading and footpaths is the same thing, that we've got the forestry targeted rate based on hectares, approximately 0 to 3% of the actual rate.
That's great to see.
Of the full rate. 0 to 2% for fees and charges, and once again, that's minimal because there's not that many fees and charges. And then the balance of those is 35% general rate and 62% grants and subsidies by way of the FAR rate. And that will roll through into, actually I need to put that into the capital funding as well. Solid waste, 0 to 5% fees and charges and 95 to 100% general rate. I'm flowing through these now. Flood protection and land drainage. Targeted rates for 85 to 95 and the general rate 5 to 15. Which was 10 and 90, obviously.
I've got a question on that, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you. We've got, as we know, the specific targeted rate for Ruawai. Do we have, what happens, do we fund all the other drainage entities that are over in the west or in the district? How do we fund that, just for general rates?
No, it's just the same way through targeted rates. And there's obviously a percentage that goes to general rates.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think.
There's about 20 drainage districts.
Well, okay, I was told last night it was 35.
There might be,
But do we do a targeted rate for,
28, there we go.
do we do a targeted rate for all? Sorry, I'm asking.
Yes, we do, and it's,
Okay, thank you.
I'm paying target rates, and I think there's one constituent met yesterday. I was paying $40,000 rates, and much of it was because he has big land, and I won't name him. But all the drainage districts are sitting on money, which is not being used. I think the issue is more than usage of money rather than collection of money. Yeah.
Yep.
They are not being well managed.
No.
Yeah.
But that's a separate discussion.
Conversation, yeah.
On the radar. Right.
District plan is 100% general. What do you do? Have you ever had any operational changes that you funded by?
New plan changes.
Yeah, just individual plan changes that you've funded?
Yes, we have. We've actually had 4 this year.
Okay, then that needs to be changed as well. It's not 100% general rate.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
So what we do anyway is when we have plan changes, the fees that we incur are charged on.
Charged on.
Of the,
Does that sit in your district plan? Okay, I'll go and ask that question, work out where it needs to sit.
So is that 100% coverage, Sue, the fees?
I'm not sure, I'd have to call on,
Michael?
Mike. 100% yes, it's saying yes.
Yeah.
Up until, both of the councils,
So does that sit in the general rate and, sorry, in the district plan activity?
what's in that fees and charges policy?
Yeah, so but is the money for all of that, does that come into the activity of district plan? Or,
Not resource consent.
Where does the money go?
Yeah.
Goes into our board planning budget.
okay, yeah, we'll check that out, okay. So
It's all for
let's
the
get that
It'd
in.
be district leadership. Board planning could be under district leadership potentially, but we'd have to check
Yeah,
that.
we'll check that out.
Did you have a?
Yeah,
That's all right.
thank you. So with a private plan change,
Mhm.
charges are just going to be actual or fair and reasonable. So we're not making anything out of it anyway, so it doesn't really go any, I mean, it has to go somewhere, but it doesn't go anywhere because we're just recouping our costs, aren't we?
Yeah, but once we come back to that again, is that if you've got it as a fee and charge in your fees and charges, you have to have it in your revenue and financing policy to make sure that you can charge it in the first place. So the bit that we just need to make sure is that our revenue financing policy is, you might have in fees and charges and you might be charging it, but do we have the ability to actually get that at the moment? And we just want to make sure that we've got all those ducks in a row.
One of the other things that arose in that conversation is we've always had these big budgets put to us for district plan reviews and things, you know, $3 million or something. One of the questions I asked was how much of that was the internal staff salaries and overheads, and I was told it's not included because we don't know how to account for it, which I don't accept. So how do we deal with accounting for that? It might be a different topic.
Yes, that's a slightly different topic. I will defer to the person
Yeah, all right.
to my right around how that gets dealt with, but
So that's to do with the staff time into plan changes.
No, into into like the district plan review.
Yep.
It's a big budget, and when I asked what proportion of that budget is your staff salaries and overheads, I was told, oh, we don't know, we don't account for that in that budget because it's too difficult to account for several different work programs at the same time. So what's the current situation?
So that may be right. I don't, and it's not my understanding that the district plan people will fill out timesheets. So it's, yeah. So
And how then do they account for the time that they attribute to a private plan change and the district plan review and other work that they're,
have to defer to the manager of that because.
he might not know, he's not been there that long. You can come back to me with an answer.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But it's a good question.
Councillor Vincent?
Yeah, just a small point, it's not a major item, but there is an unrecoverable part of a private plan change where it goes to appeal.
yes,
And
yeah,
we have an order for costs, and just recently we've considered, and we were thinking we might go for 60%, but for another 40%, that's, you will get where.
yes, yeah.
Excluded matter, or is that in the public forum?
I think that's, yeah, possibly some of it might have been in committee, yes. Although the fact that we were discussing it, I think was beneficial information. But, yes.
Okay, so back to emergency management, that's 100% general rates. Governance, 100% general, and then I've done the split out for interest because interest does fund some of the corporate expenses. So I've added that in as well because it wasn't in there before. Economic development is 100%. And then the remainder are technically not council rates, they're rates that are actually being targeted through council and then given directly to the halls. There we go, we did manage to do that.
Yeah, so I just want to say from this conversation, we're bringing back to you so that information on building consents and resource consents and whether we can actually increase the fees to get more, the higher percentages. That's what you're wanting to see. We'll come back to you on stormwater and the possibility of equalising. We'll come back to you on district plan and try and work out whether that's actually, or the plan changes, whether they're under district leadership or under district plan, and also how we account for staff time under plan changes. So that's what I've written down, okay, from that stage 1 conversation.
Staff time on the district plan review, wasn't it, the plan changes?
That was my question.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
We go back to that slide.
Yeah, so
So
we'll
we'll
go back.
talk about step 2.
Oh, no, I've gone the wrong way, have I? Yeah, there you go. Go back that way. Good.
Did you realise?
Right. there we go.
Okay. So this is the consideration that we need to talk about for step 2 and what we'd like to talk about and what we would like to see. So the first conversation was around LV versus CV. And we can do that as part of the modelling that we bring back to you. That will also have an impact on the differentials because at the moment the differentials are taking into account and making up for the commercial side of things not having the commercial side is higher, and it's higher because it's actually it's pushing some of that money from general rates into commercial to account for that. So we'll have to have a look at the differentials as part of that process, and those two go together. The other question is around how we use the UAGC. And in most rural communities, there's normally always been a real big push, especially from people like Federated Farmers, about making sure that we're using that to the 30% as much as we can, so that we get our uniform annual charge for 30%. One thing that council does use UAGCs for is that mitigation of lower income people who have no ability to change income, and the UAGC is a way to pull things up our bell curves a little bit further in and reduce that, reduce the impact of a rate change onto lower socioeconomic and fixed income people. So that's sometimes how the UAGC has worked, because what you do with the UAGC is you set that at a dollar value. So let's say it's $1,000. And then the balance of the general rate is then normally goes through based on your land value or capital value. If you're on a lower socioeconomic or a fixed income, if you make that $800 and then you have the rest of it go through the general rates or on land value or capital value, what you tend to find is these properties stay lower than they would have if the UAGC was at $1,000. So it's around how we want to use that UAGC, and we can consider that as part of step 2. And it's to see where they sit. And some of that is about affordability.
Yeah. That's the last one from Howard.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the corollary of what you've stated there is that we have an enormous opposite end of the bell curve where we've got people that their rates are horrendously high as well. So
yeah,
spreading it might be a little bit more for some, but if we just keep pushing those high ends out and out, they're actually out of their homes too.
Yes.
On fixed incomes, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the bit that when you start looking at affordability, we need to be very careful in that space as to what that looks like.
I just had a quick query, when you talk about UAGC, and I'm sorry, it's not directly relevant, but what is our current UAGC? Is it 800?
No, well, it was 800. We reduced it to 725 because, dollars, because of the fact that we did a target rate, which is a sort of UAGC in disguise for the parks and
Okay.
libraries. So you have to take it into account both of those because they are uniform charges that come to the 30%.
And both of them take us to just about the 30%.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question, I mean, now, our council is wanting to be the one which is a practical council rather than theoretical, right? So on comparison of rates based on areas, generally speaking, we are paying in Kaipara much more than people are paying in Auckland or Whangarei. So I think we have to look at ways and means to correct it at some point of time. That's why I was raising this point to you. What are the areas? And you made these good points here. And we have to work around. Maybe CV or capital value is the solution because the capital value is based on the developments. So you might be sitting on 500 hectares or whatever, and then you have nothing. And then somebody sitting on a small would have 6 houses on it, you know? So you have to have a fair idea of which is right and which is not.
Yeah.
So I think these items has to be more practical rather than just a theory session, especially in Kaipara, because people are really fed up. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we'll do is when we come back, when we do the modelling, it'll show you things like which areas it's hitting, which sectors it's hitting, what impact changing to CV does.
Yeah.
Generally, it pushes money into, you've done it a little bit already with your differentials, so that it would be interesting to see what the impact is overall once you start doing that, because differentials will definitely need to change because they have taken into account that push into commercial sectors anyway, because you're running it at 155 versus 1 or 155 versus 100. So you're doing that push towards the commercial space anyway. What will happen with CV in residential spaces is it will be those people who might be sitting on a larger section but have a small house will probably find that they have a reduction in rates versus those people who are sitting on a smaller section but have a big house that's with a high capital value.
That's the because it's more related to the actual value, the QV.
Yeah. So rates is a pretty blunt instrument. It's not particularly. We aren't able, like the government is, to be able to go and understand what level of income that they have. That's what government can do with income tax. We don't have that opportunity. It's around what they have in the way of assets. So that's the bit that we.
Thank you.
And that's where we get. Sorry, one last question from that is that's where we can use the remission rates and the remissions policies and the UAGCs for things like hardship or smoothing rates changes through a process, so that we end up taking account of 95% here, but those 5% that have an issue, we can do something about.
The last one.
Except that we do in some cases know people's income. For example, we have the Fonterra, a large corporation at Mangataroto with a land value of $600,000, effectively paying about a third of the rates of a widowed private landowner in Alamar Crescent at Mangawhai, because they're both on land value.
Yeah. And that's where a capital value will make, and hence saying that the differential is pushing some of that, but in those instances, it won't be enough. It won't be enough of a push that CV will give you versus LV.
It'll improve it though, if you've got a $10 million.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm agreeing with you in saying that the differential is for those people won't be big enough to push it to Fonterra, to push it to the level that CV will actually create So yes, there'll be a significant difference for some of those commercial people when we do it.
So, thank you, Mr Mayor. To add to councillor Mayor's point earlier on, when you come back with this on LV and LC, you know, we've got our current rates, and I know that you talked about comparing to what we've got at the moment. So we know what our average rates are for residential. Are we able to get some comparisons with other districts just to see if in fact we are already really exorbitantly high?
Without pushing anyone's barrows, there is a organisation out there that does that already, that you can probably have a look at. I'm not, yes, there is a.
Which one?
Taxpayers Union.
Does a bit of that work already. The hard thing is that it's very hard to compare
Like for like.
like for like, because they all have very different policies. CV versus LV, how they use the UAGC, whether they've done targeted rates for parks or whether it's all in general rates. So really you come down and you do the average that the Taxpayers Union probably does as much as I would do anyway. So that's the one that I would look at.
Thank you.
Not that I like to push their barrow, but they do a bit of work in that space.
We might just dig in a bit and see what we've got for when you come back.
The other thing that some councils have looked at, which is what I talked about yesterday, or earlier, sorry, which is the separately used or inhabited part, charging for UAGC versus rating unit. And that has a number of effects. So where you have one title, but you might have two separately used or inhabited parts because you have possibly two families living on it, that would mean that a UAGC would be charged to that one rating unit twice rather than once.
At equal value?
At equal value, because it's a uniform annual general charge. That happens also when you look at farms, and farms might have 4 or 5 houses on it because they have 4 or 5 users. That would then end up with 4 or 5 UAGCs rather than.
Camp clubs out at Bailey's Beach as well, where there could be 14 or 15 individual houses on one title. And that's long been a contentious issue.
Yeah.
So how much consideration have you started to make regarding the effect of the granny flat legislation proposal in terms of that?
So that has an effect from a building control authority process, from a resource consent, but doesn't have an impact on whether it would be considered to be a separately used or inhabited part, because as soon as it can be lived in by itself, so it would normally have to have some form of toiletry, a kitchen and, you know, showering facilities, that would create it to be a separately used and inhabited part. The definition of that we would need to look into as part of your process. The bit that probably is a little bit of a hindrance in that space, but we do have time to answer that question, would be before you actually would implement the policy, but we don't have probably a really good understanding of separately used or inhabited part outside of those areas that aren't connected to water and wastewater. Because water and wastewater normally would give you an indication as to how many houses are on that section, because you need a waste for both of them. So that's the bit where we would run into to be able to do it, to understand what's on.
Oh, yeah, because you've got the second part of that consideration, I would guess, is that some of those granny flats will be hooked up to self-serving sewers and water, whereas other ones will be in, town supply.
Yeah.
I think with the legislation or the proposal, unless you are connected to public services, you won't be able to do it. Or something like that affects us a lot.
Because you would have to have a resource consent for a secondary septic tank changer, I would normally expect.
All I would say to the chair is we should not get into conjecture and surmises. I actually heard Chris Bishop on this policy last weekend in detail. And there are people even taking objection to the words granny, and one of the granny objected to, why are you calling it a granny? But there's more to come and more clarity to come, and we have a submission on this matter. So I think it's premature to ask him what are the possibilities.
So there's a difference though already between, that's talking about the building consent process.
Yeah.
Whether it would be considered to be a separately used or inhabited part is already understood. That we know that already, that's been tested through the courts as to what's being considered to be a separate part. The bit that we will struggle with is understanding what's in that space outside of anything that's connected to water or wastewater, unless there's been some information known on some of the farms, et cetera, where there might be 3 or 4 houses, but we just don't know.
Yeah, so that's why I think at the moment we don't, uniform charge isn't on every SURP, is it?
It's used for wastewater
Yeah,
and.
just wastewater,
Yeah.
because it's connected and we
Because
can
it's-
tell. Don't know. And the same with the parks and libraries targeted rate. That was just on, wasn't on every separate unit.
Yeah, it's purely on the rating unit.
Okay, you have a question, Deputy?
Oh, thank you. Probably those of us that have been around for a little while, we've sort of had this conversation a few times about SURPs and never gone down that track.
Yes.
So it's not a new topic, but it is for some.
Yeah. The bit probably is if you're looking at LV and CV going to SURPs at the same time as a change might be a little bit of a step too far. And that if you're doing the CV, LV, that we probably would look to take that off the table as something at the moment. And this is the one where we went through this work with a council recently, and they did decide to stay on rating units rather than separately used or inhabited parts. And the granny flat was a perfect example of where they had a lot of people come in and talk about the fact that I've just built something on the back of my house for my parents to live in. That wouldn't be, they don't eat in there. They are a part of our family. It's one family. It's one rating unit. It's not any bigger than that. So that is where they've decided to stay on rating units rather than separately used inhabited parts. It was one that I wanted to be able to make sure that we're putting it on or off the table, and it was a council decision as to whether we did that or not.
Right.
So if we're in agreement?
Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else that people would like to look at as part of step 2?
Councillor Larson.
What are you wanting from us today? You're just wanting what things we want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, you'll take direction on what we want to do with those things.
Absolutely. So what we want to look at will come back as part of step 2 with the modelling that we will do. And we've, hence putting up the questions, because that will change how we do that modelling. The decisions will be coming once we've actually said, okay, this is the overall impact, this is what it is, and we adopt the final policy for consultation, which is deemed to be the end of October. So this is really just a what do we want to look at conversation now. It's easier to know that now than know that halfway through when we're actually full blown through the process and are running out of time to do any more changes, so.
Right, thank you.
I think that's us.
That's us? Oh,
The question was there anything else we wanted to look at?
look, I'm sure we can email, but the only thing I would say is, with the council's vision and outcomes, we're trying to make things as affordable for people to come into our district as possible. So I think keep that top of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Rightio. Fantastic. Thank you.
Really, thank you.
It's just, was it the, barbecue hut?
Okay, Mr Mayor, so thank you for that. It's fun. It's going to move on to the representation review and invite Ben and Dale up to take you through your first briefing on that after this morning's decision.
Long wait for that, isn't it? Yeah. They were supposed to do earlier.
We're into it already.
I hope they don't charge us for that.
Thanks, Liam.
Legal challenge, it's all puffing in. Need to find it.
I think it might be.
Stunt.
See. Mr Mayor, thank you. So we have Dale and Ben. Hand over to you, Dale.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So following on from this morning's meeting, decision to disestablish the Maori ward, a shortened representation review is now required. Under the new legislation, an initial proposal must be determined or must be made.
Sorry to interrupt. May I ask you to speak a bit louder, please?
Okay, I will.
For
Our media friends. Okay, I'll start again. So following on from this morning's meeting and decision to disestablish the Maori ward, a shortened representation review is now required. Under the new legislation, an initial proposal must be made by the 13th of September. We have developed for this briefing today a number of options for consideration, some of which are non-compliant with that plus or minus 10% rule, and some may even be a little bit on the radical side, which I always like to drop in there just for broad options that we are looking at. We have a PowerPoint on this, and I'll hand this over to Ben to talk us through the various options and the background.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much. Just firstly, by way of introduction, it's great to meet you all. I'm Ben Rover. So I work with Dale Ostowski with Election Services. Dale is, of course, your electoral officer, but we assist councils with all things related to elections, democratic reviews of the electoral system, Maori wards, representation reviews, and of course, elections. Today, I'm going to talk about the process of a shortened representation review, how it all works, what's required, and then we can start getting into the nuts and bolts of the options. Dale just mentioned some of them are not compliant. We have kept them in there as a point of difference just to demonstrate why they're not compliant. But of course, we want to hear from you. So if you have any ideas, if there's anything in particular you'd like us to explore for this review, let us know. We're more than happy to go away and explore any other options that you've got in mind. So I'll start off with the objective of today's workshop. It's to give you all an understanding of this process and get some direction from you as to what you want us to look into. An initial proposal report needs to go to council by the 13th of September, and we're looking at doing that on the 4th of September. Only one option can be resolved at that. One option has to be resolved for the initial proposal. And like I said, we're looking at the 4th of September for that meeting. Bit of background, you'll be familiar, of course, with the new legislation. So councils that disestablish their Māori wards either have to revert back to the arrangements that were in place before Māori wards were introduced or conduct a shortened review. Now, that first option is not available to Kaipara District Council. The district has changed a lot in the last 6 years. In particular, Kaiwaka Mangawhai has grown quite significantly. So the Local Government Commission have informed us that reverting back to the old arrangements simply wouldn't be suitable. And therefore, we need to conduct a shortened review. So what is a review? Of course, it's a review of the total number of councillors, as well as the basis of their election. So whether they are elected from wards or everyone's elected at large, or a mixture. You can have some elected from a certain number of wards and some councillors elected at large. If there are going to be wards, how many councillors are elected for each ward? What are the names of those wards? What are the boundaries of the wards? And then the same thing for community boards. we're going to establish them, how many community board members, what are the boundaries? Do you want to appoint councillors to community boards, that sort of thing. Status quo, of course, you're familiar with 8 councillors from 3 general wards and 1 Maori ward councillor elected district-wide, no community boards. So those current arrangements are our starting point. We've got there the 3 general wards and 1 Maori ward. The number of members for each ward and the population per member ratio. You see in here, we've got the quota. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the fair representation rule, which is the rule that councillors should be representing approximately the same number of people. They have to be within 10%, plus or minus 10% of the district average. If they're not, there could be good reasons for that, but those arrangements have to go to the Local Government Commission to review and then make that determination. Good question?
Quick question, Ben. Can we not get access to more updated figures in June 30, 2023?
The data that we have to use is population estimates from 30th of June 2023.
Is that from Infometrics, is it?
What's that?
Is that from Infometrics, is it?
We get the data from Statistics New Zealand. They compile the data. This is based off the 2018 census. Every year they make an annual estimate accounting for births, deaths, and people moving in the district. But we've been told the new census data won't be ready in time in the required format. So all councils that are doing a representation review this year have to use the same set of data.
That's coming from Local Government Commission, that's directive, yeah.
Just a quick.
Yes or no?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick kind of query. Following on to this court position whereby an injunction can be sought or deliberated. Let's say within, just hypothetically, in a week, does it anyway affect your deliberations and this thing going on?
We will still have to comply with the law.
Yeah.
Which is that if you do a shortened review, which we're down the track of doing, then we have to have an initial proposal by the 13th of September. So we would carry on with that. I mean, it's all a bit speculative whether it's upheld or not, we don't know. So we just have to carry on. We're on a very, very tight timeframe. So we have to just.
So you will continue regardless of the injunction?
We've done a lot of work now with some options. We're getting some feedback from you guys today as to what's acceptable.
Maybe you do it faster. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. There's a map there of the current arrangements, but I'm sure you're familiar with that. There are the 3 wards and the 1 district-wide Māori ward. We've got an indicative timetable here. So today, the 7th of August, resolution to disestablish Māori wards, as well as the first council briefing. We're looking at coming back on the 21st of August for another briefing. So depending on the outcome of today, if there's something for us to go away and work through, we'd come back on the 21st of August and report back on that. The initial proposal resolution, we're looking at the 4th of September. We've then got 7 days to make a public notice, to put out a public notice of the initial proposal. And that starts the 3-week submission period where any interested person can make a submission on the initial proposal, whether they support it or not. Depending on how many submissions are received, we're looking at scheduling a submission hearing. It'll be sometime in October, most likely. That's where anyone who's made a submission can be heard by council. We'll then have another briefing to summarise those submissions and determine whether or not you wish to make any changes to your proposal. So at that point, you can make changes to the proposal as long as they're supported by a submission. And then a final proposal will be resolved, looking at the 30th of October for that final proposal resolution. Now, if any objections or appeals are received, or if the final proposal doesn't comply with that plus or minus 10% rule, then those arrangements have to be referred to the Local Government Commission. They'll review them and make a determination. So end of 2024, we may have to forward everything off to the Local Government Commission, and they've got until the 10th of April next year to make their determination in time for the 2025 elections. So talk about the representation review. There's 3 key things that the Commission are looking for communities of interest, effective representation and fair representation. Starting with communities of interest, this is all about where do people identify with? So what are the communities? Where do people shop? Where do they go to school? Where do they access their daily goods and services? The Local Government Commission has three dimensions for identifying what they are: perceptual, functional and political. And effective representation is about, do we have the right number of councillors? Does each ward have the right number of councillors? Are they elected from appropriate boundaries? As well as looking at community boards, do we need to consider establishing them? Fair representation is the rule I was just talking about, the plus or minus 10% rule. The way we calculate this is we consider the total population divided by the number of councillors and then do that same calculation for each ward. And each ward councillor should be representing within plus or minus 10% of that district average.
So sorry, just, so you mentioned that in red 10.39, it's an aberration or it is given?
That was for the current arrangements?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Otumatea General Ward, minus 10.39.
Yes.
Now that we've disestablished Māori wards, we have to look at the whole thing again.
Add Maori in general together, yeah.
All right, thank you.
So to do this, we've had a preliminary look at some options. There's 7 of them here, but we're more than happy to discuss anything else that you've got in mind. Not all compliant, of course. There's one radical one at the end. So get into them.
Oh, thank you, Richard. So are you wanting some feedback or direction around the table today on the options?
Yes, I'll go through the 7 options.
Okay.
Anything comes to mind, let us know. If you've got something totally different, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Councillor Erin Wilson, Collins?
Thank you. Do we need to have wards at all?
No, you can elect all councillors at large in the same way that you elect the mayor at large.
Thanks.
So there is quite a bit of flexibility available, isn't there, for elected members to choose?
So all can be elected by wards, which is the status quo now. All can be elected at large, like the mayor, or you can have a mixture. So you might have 4 elected at large and 4 elected from wards, for example. So it is reasonably flexible.
Okay.
If we take the current arrangements, we just established the Māori ward, but the 3 general ward boundaries, and we have 8 councillors in that case. I should point out that the first question we really are asking is what's the right number of councillors? We've proposed these options based on 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. But if you know what the right number of councillors are, how I think work from there. You can legally have between 5 and 29.
Yes.
You haven't explored up to.
More the merrier.
Okay, so option 1 is to disestablish the Māori ward, but keep the 3 general wards. We have to add in the Māori population into those wards. If we were to do that, the Otumatea ward in the middle there is slightly underpopulated, minus 10.93%. So this option could be resolved because it's non-compliant. It would have to go to the Local Government Commission. The next option I'm going to talk about is exactly the same, but with a minor boundary change, slightly increasing the size of the Otumatea ward and therefore making it compliant.
There's about 64 people affected. So if we were able to nudge a boundary to incorporate those 64 people, and option 2 there shows that 110 in the nearest mesh block, which would make it compliant.
So that's another point. We have to draw the boundaries based on mesh blocks. We can't draw the boundaries anywhere we want. We have to draw them along the lines of the mesh blocks. So this option here slightly increases the size of the Otumatea General Ward, moving that boundary a little bit further north into the Wairoa Ward, and that leaves the arrangements compliant. We have 3 from Kawaka Mangawhai, 2 from Otumatea, and 3 from Wairoa, so that's 8.
So, question, that area that you got designated there for 110, what is it? Is that Oakley or is it inland from there?
Oh, I'd have to give you a more detailed map to discuss that. This is really just an example of the kinds of things.
We can certainly provide a more detailed map,
Yeah, I just-
exactly where the roads are, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Tangaroora, for instance.
So if any of these options are interesting to you, I'd be more than happy to give you more detail on them.
Not that far out.
No. No, it can't be Tangaroora. No, it's not.
Option 3 we've got here is 9 councillors from 3 wards, so keeping the same number of councillors. 3, 3 and 3, you can see there that it's nowhere near compliant. Odumatea is too small to have 3 out of 9 councillors. Kawaka Mangawhai is about right, but Wairoa Ward is too big to have 3 out of 9 councillors. 10 councillors, if you wanted to go to 10, we did look at a 4-2-4 split. Odumatea is in this case too big. It's too big to have 2 out of 10 councillors. If you did want to pursue this option further, we could look at a boundary change, but that's an increase in the size of council. You may not want to do that. Option 5, 7 councillors from 3 wards, but keeping the same boundaries. 2 from Kawaka Mangawhai, 2 from Odumatea, and 3 from Wairoa. This is also not compliant. Kawaka Mangawhai is far too big to have 2 out of 7 councillors. Odumatea is far too small to have 2 out of 7 councillors. So if you wanted to go to 7 councillors, we did look at another breakdown. This option here would be 3 from Kawaka Mangawhai, 1 from Odumatea, and 3 from Wairoa. Now this would not be compliant unless we made a boundary change. So we did look into, where could you move those boundaries? In this case, we've got more than 1,000 people, just under 1,400 people moving from Odumatea into Wairoa, and Kawaka Mangawhai also getting bigger. We moved that boundary all the way up to Mangataroto. That doesn't make it entirely compliant. It's still a little bit out of compliance. If we wanted to go with this option but make it compliant, we'd have to look further into exactly what happens with that boundary. Option 7, this is what we call the radical one. 2 wards, east and west. We put here 3 councillors from each ward. You could have 4 councillors from each ward. Whether or not you think it's appropriate to only have 2 wards is another question. But where we put that boundary there, both wards have approximately the same number of people. So you could put the boundary there and then have an equal number of councillors from each ward.
I think that boundary was a river, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly a river at the northern end.
Northern end, yeah.
Yeah.
Waipua.
Right, so that's a starting point for you. And maybe we could get some feedback from you at this point. Any preferred option? What's the right number of councillors? I think I heard 6 before. Do we want only wards or a mixture? 3 wards, 4 wards, 5 wards?
2 wards.
2 wards? No wards?
No wards.
The last one.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Hey, thanks for this awesome work. It's really beautifully set out. I particularly think with the very limited time frame that we've got and without causing too much confusion in the community, and also the fact that I think we have our communities of interest reasonably well aligned at the moment, that we ought to proceed with option 2.
This is to keep the same boundaries as they are, make a minor adjustment to make the Odumatea ward.
And the reason that I think that's okay is we sort of tweaked around with that boundary there a little bit before. It is in that sort of central district that we've got there, and it's a rural community which is reasonably well connected back in one way or the other. So I think that would be the best practice that we could find without causing too much confusing change.
So you want more detail on exactly where that boundary is and where?
People might be interested to see.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Just to clarify, did you say option 3 or 2?
2.
2. That's a safe zone, no red stickers there, and everything is within 10 compliance.
It's compliant, yes.
All right, so we don't have to do much in there, no boundary changes.
Very minor boundary change, move about 110.
That dark blue is the boundary changes.
Dark blue, it's currently part of the Wairoa ward, but we're proposing to make it part of Odumatea.
All right, thank you. I'm happy with you.
I had that one down as well.
Yeah.
I think that that's a logical one, but I'm wondering, is there, is there room, because the Wairoa ward is so big, whether there's an option to actually add another one and splitting that? And have something around Dargaville and then something around the country side.
But what it used to be, I mean, we used to have a Dargaville ward and then we used to have a Central, was it, or
Yeah, I don't,
West Coast Central? That's right.
Yeah.
So this ward currently has 3 councillors.
no,
If we were to make it 2 wards, 1 ward with 1 councillor,
Dargaville.
1 ward with 2 councillors, as long as those populations were proportional in that one of them had twice as many people as the other one, to have 2 councillors versus 1, we could make that work.
I'm asking this without any knowledge of the history, but I'm asking it on the basis of, look at the expense. And all 3 are currently based in Dargaville. So, there is an opportunity for representation from outside of it. Just saying.
We have been down that track before, and the problem is that when you start moving the boundaries, you go from Dargaville not being Dargaville or the other way around. So it's hard to, as a provincial sort of service town and surrounding area, it kind of works as a vague community of interest. But when you start going, let's take some of the urban area and add in some of the rural and then leave the rest of the rural around the outside, it sort of chops it up a bit.
I just, I don't know, I could ask the members how often they get out and about around the whole area.
Change from that,
We had
just changed it.
we had to absorb Dargaville into West Coast Central
Yeah.
to meet the the population requirement.
Like different
Numbers.
Yeah.
Already had that change.
When I look at that map there,
But I understand what you're saying, and I actually totally agree that there's
Yeah.
different, communities of interest in those wards. But population wise, you can't split it as far as I
Quite difficult.
did last time. It was very difficult
Yeah.
to try and split it into 2.
Yeah.
so rural is captured with Paparoa there, right? Or Paparoa, rural. Where's rural?
Ties in with.
Odomatea.
Odomatea.
Okay.
Yeah.
But see, I think that actually, in my mind, that works quite well because Dargaville's the central position where everyone in the light green converges on that town. Do you agree with that, Aaron?
I do, but I think councillor Howard raised a valid point though, that all the elected members for the wider award are residents of Dargaville. They've actually lost their West Coast Central representation by having 1 ward, but I don't know how to fix it. That's a you problem.
Would you like us to do some modelling on that, just to report back? This would be the boundary if we could have 1 for.
That would be helpful, yeah.
Through the chair, I quite like a part of the fact I originally said option 2. So there is that critical mass of about 8% here, or 9% Otamia minus. So there is a room for having another. So instead of 8 councillor, there is 9.
If you added 1 to Odomatea, that would be.
Or whatever, yeah.
Councillor Larson?
Yeah, I think there's an issue with that idea because you end up with this enormous rural area potentially having 1 councillor to cover that all of those little settlements and towns. And I think it's problematic.
Well, we have none now.
We can look at it.
So we,
Might not land there.
Let's look at it.
We will look at the modelling, yeah. I will love to.
And report back.
I'm not live there, but there's still
Oh,
a ward.
I understand, I understand.
Okay, shall we move on?
And I got to admit openly that I'm quite happy to drop, just a thought, I'm quite happy to drop that, but it seems to me a question, based on representation of those rural areas, that's where I'm coming from, not because we've got 3 councillors in Dargaville, anything like that. But on the other hand, I don't want to go back feeding old decisions. You know, we've moved forward, so maybe that's rationale for scrapping it totally, but I'm just throwing it out there.
We don't know if we don't look at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll report back.
Yeah,
You can look at it or chuck it out.
yeah. The numbers may be exciting, they may be disturbing, but we need to see that. Yeah, thank you.
I would suggest, if you don't mind, your worship, that the councillors aren't entirely only connected to Dargaville Township at all. And one of them lives on the road outside of Dargaville, and another one is very heavily associated with their history in Pangatororia and is connected in the rural community. So I would argue that they're not just Dargaville focused at all.
Oh,
No one suggested that.
Yeah, you know, we are not saying Dargaville, we're saying Wairoa. I don't know what, all northern Wairoa, isn't it?
Okay,
Right, well, on the 21st of August, we'll come back for another briefing, research that option. We'll provide a little bit more detailed maps, so you can see exactly where that proposed boundary is. Moving forward for an initial proposal resolution on the 4th.
Yep, thank you.
Sorry, just one more thing, because Gordon can't be here this afternoon.
yeah.
He has, talked about reducing the number of elected members, which, is a good idea.
We would be, we'd be dropping from 9 to 8. Well,
He's talking.
But yeah, if there is any other solution that drops it down, I mean, you've probably already looked at it in great detail, I'm sure. 8 is what we had last term, which
Correct.
was manageable. But there is
6, 7.
in the community about how many elected members we have per head of population. Well, I believe it's one of the,
Yeah, it's around about the 3,000.
and you almost individually know your 3,000 people.
I mean, it is possible. There are options reducing it further. But option 6, as I pointed out, is going down to 7 councillors.
Yeah,
Have to make some pretty substantial boundary changes to make them fit.
okay.
And
well, good. So we look forward to seeing you on the 21st.
so we're happy with 8,
thank you.
happy with 8 as a benchmark.
I would say we won't mind 9, if this option is looked at. The one
We'll work on,
You mentioned 8.
work on 8. Are we happy with wards rather than at large or a mixture? I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah, I'm happy.
Happy with wards?
Wards, yeah.
I am personally. You know, I hear,
Interested to know more about at large.
Well, it's like the mayor, everyone votes for
Yeah.
everyone. But
So
one of the negatives is that you could all come from
One area, yeah.
Yep. Potentially.
I mean, as a mayor, I like the fact despite its participatory and we're supposed to represent a whole community, you get issues where everyone knows about it who happen to be the member in that. You know, like if you've got an issue in Kaiwaka, we're far more likely to know about it than someone who's living in Dargaville full time. So I quite like that. Yep.
And finally, no community boards again. I'm assuming that, no
8 councillors.
community boards. That's good steer. Thank you.
easy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Dale. The next one is the regional accessibility strategy. And we have Jenny Rooney and Cash Jennings.
Anna Kurzweil.
Want to have 5 minutes for a quick one?
Yeah.
Thanks for the
But.
Okay, this is the review of revenue and financing policy for the annual plan, 225-26. It's been,
I know.
well, no, I've got that wrong, haven't I?
It's a regional accessibility strategy.
My head is gone. Yeah, regional access, sorry about that, yeah. Jenny Rooney, Tash Jennings and the team.
I know, yep.
So I'm just gonna get that out of here. Let's see. Yeah.
Can we go on to slides, show or?
Why but not? Okay, I'm raising it, so.
I didn't get one.
Here we go. And then I just press.
Okay, Mr. Howard, you're good? I know, we're going to lessen your workload soon. We're going to take a couple of options out. Are you guys good to go?
Yeah, are we waiting for the mayor?
Go on. He's just going to the toilet, so it won't be too long. So
Okay,
we need to start.
cool. Good, everyone. Jenny Rooney, and I'm here to present the Regional Accessibility Strategy alongside my colleagues Tash Jennings and Annika Tierney Lamasino. Yep, got it. So I'll be presenting the PowerPoint. I'm not the subject matter expert on the actual strategy, and so I'll be handing any questions over to Tash and Annika. So the reason for developing a region-wide strategy is to enable people with access needs to live, work and play and participate across the community. So it's giving them the opportunity to be more inclusive. Why we're doing this is people have reported that local government really can support the effects they're having in their daily lives. And in Northland, we have one of the highest rates of disabilities at 29%. I won't go through all of the different amounts there. There's also, in terms of obligations from local government as well, that have been taken into account in the strategy and developing the strategy. How we got to where we are in May 2019, the Northland Chief Executive from Forum proposed a region-wide disability strategy for Northland. A council working group was formed, of which we had representation as well. So it was all of the councils, and Whānau North District Council, Whangarei District Council, Kaipara District Council and Northland Regional Council. So there's been public consultation and the community working groups have continued, and they have put together the strategy, which has now been developed by 3 of the councils since the paper was written. So Far North District Council, Whangarei District Council and Northland Regional Council have adopted it. And our purpose today is bringing it to you for review, for a briefing, and then we'll be taking it to the August Council meeting for adoption. Next steps for it as well, it's minimal or low cost or no cost, because it for us will be just raising awareness internally, improving practices and upskilling staff in terms of accessibility issues. And then identifying any improvements and embedding it into our BAU. Thank you. So if you have any questions for us through the chair.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, thank you. So this is a region-wise strategy. Is it funded by the central?
I'll put that over to you, Tara.
There's no funding attributed to any of the actions at this stage. If there is, identify activities that require funding, that would be part of the long-term plan or annual
plan process.
Are you looking for a mobility bus, these people disabled in town? Which is separately funded.
No,
It has been the constant asking it.
that could be an action that one of the councils identify that they want to pursue that, but
I
at
have
this
to
stage,
get back to you if I do. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Larson.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks. Just coming back to the point that you made about our obligations, and I see you've got a page on that in the
Yes.
presentation. Are these statutory obligations? And if so, where are they found?
I'll pass that over to Annika.
So within the Local Government Act, in terms of the principles relating to local authorities, there is a mention around when making decisions, a local authority should take account of the diversity of the community and community's interest within the district and region. Other than that, New Zealand, of course, ratified the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008, and we do have the National Disability Strategy. But other than that, there are no specific obligations around supporting the disability community at this stage.
So the convention and the strategy aren't linked to the government by statute in any way.
They do encourage local territories to consider the demographics within their district, but they don't require it, no.
And so if we go to the situation that I hear the most about is accessibility. And you talked about the population in Northland, Kaipara, it's similar. What percentage of people are wheelchair and can only use the wheelchair for accessing facilities?
We are waiting for the Bureau of Statistics to release that most recent information. I'm waiting very patiently for that to be released, and I can certainly come back to you with more specific data when that is.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't have the analysis of that yet.
And so then just to go on from that, because one of the things that we have is accessibility to buildings and public toilets, and particular gradients that are set around that. Where do those standards arise from, and how are they required, or are we just using them voluntarily?
There are certain considerations within the building code. I don't have them to quote you, unfortunately. Again, I can provide that, but building code certainly mentions certain things in relation to gradients and things like that. The hope as well is that retrofitting is of course quite expensive. So if going forward, we can really be looking to mainstream inclusion and accessibility within our BAUs as much as possible and taking those things into consideration, then we hope that in the future we are in fact lowering the cost of council as accessibility continues to be prioritised, and should legislation change to be a little bit more stringent around those. But I can certainly get you the building code, where the building code mentions.
Yeah, that'd be great to know where those standards come from.
Certainly.
I mean, in terms of taking account of these needs in our legislation, obviously we can't provide accessibility to every part of our district. How do we decide how far we want to go with this? Is it a decision of the council? Or is there some guidance on that?
Good question.
It is a good question.
It is. I think through the chair at this stage, we're looking at working internally with teams on what, if you adopt the strategy, then how we can work with teams to actually put it into our BAU and what that would look like. So it's a work in progress.
And there are obviously cost considerations depending how far you go with it.
The aim at the moment is not to have cost considerations, it's to work internally within our teams and embed it into our BAU. So other than what we've talked about in terms of legislation with the Building Act, and then if there was any cost implications, it would be forecast in the next LTP.
Right, so the policy in place, make it BAU, and then tell us what the costs are going to be, rather than determining what the costs are going to be, so that we can determine how far we want to go with implementing it.
So it's not a policy, it's more of an overarching strategy for the whole region to advance in this field of accessibility. We're not telling people that they have to do this. We want them to consider accessibility upfront when they're planning a project so that we're not retrofitting 5 years down the track and costing funds as much as it would if we thought about it at the start. It's more about embedding it into our BAU. It's thought about right at the start of a project.
So are these council projects as in only council buildings, or are there other components to it? Like, are you suggesting that we have to have beach access at every beach that is compliant with this, or how does it work?
So through the chair, an example in terms of my work plan would be, I work within the engagement team. When we talk about mainstreaming inclusion in BAU, I would be considering, if I'm doing consultation with the community, that I'm not making sure that I'm unintentionally marginalising the disability community. And I am making sure to reach out to them. When we do have conversations about how we want to build, we consider universal design and we consider the cost obligations of that, rather than just not having it on our mental checklist and how we work within that. So at this stage, we're looking at really mapping out where the opportunities are and what that would look like. And in terms of accessibility as well, the beautiful thing with that is that it isn't just for persons with disabilities. It's also for older populations, for pregnant mothers, for all sorts of different people that, you know, once we have accessible and inclusive design, that really supports a lot of people and makes the experience within the district inclusive for all. But I certainly don't foresee us coming forward with a requirement that, to use your example, all beaches must meet this standard or we must do this in a certain way. It would be looking to really look for, and that's where, whilst we have the regional strategy for guidance, we have the opportunity to really dig in and really develop an action plan that is directly responsible to the needs and the scope of what we want to do within the Kaipara. That makes sense.
Yes, thanks for that. I mean, I'll let someone else speak. I just want to say that if you are going to come to us with projects in the annual plan and the long-term plan, it would be probably useful for us to know which ones you're proposing to meet the high-level accessibility standards and what the differences in cost between the two options. One final thing, what is the gradient for access if you're using the ramp?
I don't have that on me, I'm so sorry, but I can.
Yeah, I think we're looking at 1 in 10. A good example I think you'll find is Rangiora Reserve, right? So we've got a project down there being done at the moment. It is funded by TIF, Tourism Infrastructure Fund, which now no longer exists. Now, when we start thinking about infrastructure that we're putting in projects in this regard, we obviously think about the users and the potential other users down there and opening that up for accessibility. So, for example, we've planned to put a mobility park in there. That obviously is for people who are disabled, who have a mobility pass. So it could be the elderly who wouldn't have the opportunity to come down and enjoy that facility easily in the past. And that's what we do. We are putting a toilet in place there. There is a gradient, and we met on site with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor the other day around where the toilet could be located, so that there was a sufficient gradient. If we have a mobility park, therefore, if people would like to go to the toilet, they have the ability to go to the toilet as well. So it is about a little bit, there is a cost to it. I accept that, acknowledge that, but there's also a moral obligation in some ways to provide for those people who can't easily access facilities like the able-bodied. And that's what it boils down to.
I think it's horses for courses though, too.
To the chair.
Because sometimes, you know, you just can't get a 10 or 20% grade, but, you know, I mean, I know quite a few people in my realm who are, you know, wheelchair bound. They're quite capable of getting up a steeper slope, you know, so.
Sorry, your worship, you don't mean 10 or 20%, you mean 1 in 10 or 1 in 20?
1 in 20, sorry. They're quite capable of getting up a steeper slope. And what I'm saying is, doesn't want to be, we don't want to be in a position where we have a rule which must be enforced that's going to drive severe costs. That's what I'm saying. We have to have flexibility once again, and if it's not a statutory requirement, that's where we can get our flexibility, right?
Absolutely. And just to speak to the low cost, no cost side of things, which is what we're focusing on after the strategy. So hopefully that will. From a communications perspective, for example, we've got brand colours that are accessible to people in terms of colour contrast with poor vision. We've got brand colours that are not particularly accessible. So it's up to us to make sure we're using those colours that are more accessible to the majority. And also, for example, we wouldn't justify blocks of text because that makes it very difficult for people with certain cognitive disabilities to read or even interpret it at all. So there's simple, no-cost things that we can embed into our BAU that will make a difference to the people in our community.
Any further question, councillor Nair?
So I just had two things. One, obviously, to Mr. Morris. Well, we had a presenter, a blind presenter to us in Dargaville, and very passionately about no sitting place. And there was sitting benches which was removed by the council. It was a low cost or actually zero cost to keep them there. But I guess on the objection of some of the businesses or something like that, they went back to council. And there was a plea to put them back. So things like that, we don't have a good reputation for looking after disabled people in Dargaville, to be honest. And that's the feeling of most of the people. So it's not about money, it's about a moral duty, as the mayor has pointed out.
Might be across the district.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can have money for the park, why not for the disabled? I mean, they're going to use it as well. So I think we have to make a fair representation of our cost to that community, which is suffering and suffering for no fault of them. So I think we have to look at those options where they can't, they need a place to sit in the CBD and there's no place to sit. They need to go to a toilet, there should be a ramp, things like that. And doesn't cost heap. Mobility, I was suggesting, because I'm also in regional transport committee and Whangarei has one, and there is room for having a free one, you know, but you should put in the strategy. If it is funded, why not? So those disabled people probably can go to the beach or whatever, all those things. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, councillor Howard.
No answer from Morris on that.
Well,
the benches were removed. Are they back?
They're not.
So where are they?
We're looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
So Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. CEO, for just answering that, because I was going to follow up, saying I raised it initially, but you know, it'd be good to keep in the loop about where we're at with that thing, because I felt that was something that could be moved. But getting back to the point, this is really a planning. You know, I mean, you're absolutely right. Talking about nothing retrospective because it really will cost too much money. So this is all about planning up front, you know. And I'm not sure where that fits. Maybe it's my favourite topic of urban design. Maybe it's just, straight town planning. But what we need to understand is, what is the scope of the projects that you're currently looking at planning and what might be involved? And I guess that leads on to councillor Larson's that, is it now in addition to the annual plan or the future LTP? So it's good that it's there, and it's imperative that we keep our nose in front of the feet. So, we're on top of, as I'm sure you are, but we're on top of the planning, and we're not coming from the afterthoughts. So, I mean, are there any specific plans that you're working on at the moment, projects that you're working on?
Right, so after this strategy, all the individual councils will develop their own action plans that are relevant to their district. So we'll start looking business unit by business unit, what we can work on, how we can improve. Are there opportunities to collaborate with the other Northland councils, for example, in training, so that we're reducing costs to upskill our staff? So the next stage is really looking at what we can do with what we've got right now to improve in this space.
But surely even in the LTP, there are projects that we've talked about that may be implicated in this. And so we would need to be thinking at this stage about what we need to do. And that's what I mean about keeping the nose ahead of the feet. And so there must be some projects that are there in front of us that we should be looking at and considering.
Through the chair, that's probably not from Tasha's point of view. She's in the communication team. Annika's in the community engagement team. So that will be something that we could take back
and look at it through the PMO and.
Well, you know, certainly be keen to hear of what considerations are there on the table already that need to be, this approach needs to be applied to, because there must be something. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide some feedback because it's absolutely fantastic to see this document being put forward and all the Northland councils trying to work together to put accessibility front and centre of doing. I really appreciate that it's not just about built environments, it's not just about buildings, it's about communications and it's about social media. So I'm hoping I'm going to see things like photo descriptions and easier readability on our social media posts. And as you say, there's different colour palettes that work for some people that have issues, which is absolutely fantastic. I take the view, I always take the view when it comes to disability, it's not the person that's disabled, it's the environment. And I see that in this document. So I just really want to say some appreciation for the work that's gone into this. And I really hope that the adoption of this will get adopted by this council and be able to be used for thinking about those people in our community who don't have the accessibility that others do. I wouldn't care if there was one person in a wheelchair in our whole district. I really feel that that's the person we should be building our environments for, because at the end of the day, there's not one of us that won't be affected by a disability, either ourselves personally or a family member in our lifetimes. And Wedo had a point this morning about racism and the analogy of chocolate. And I actually think living with a disability is very similar. It's very hard for people to describe to those of us who are able-bodied how difficult it can be for them to communicate and function in a society that hasn't been built for them. So I just think that, I just wanted to praise the work that's gone into this from all the teams, from all the councils, and look forward to seeing this getting adopted.
Cool. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so just to update what we've got to do today. I'm going to change things up, okay? So the Resource Management Act delegations, that's item 5 of the agenda, we're going to push through to September. The Kaipara District Council Organisation Transition Program update is going to be done via email with Sarah, so she'll email you directly, so we're going to push that. Item 7 on the agenda is the Kaipara Transportation Activity Briefing for June. We're going to take that as read. We're not going to have any discussion today on that one. June's well gone. We are going to do item 8, which is the Downer Transport Update, and I'll get Annan and the team to come up in a sec. And we are going to do item 9, the Ruawai Stop Bank Project page update. Item 10, the Mangawhai Wastewater Treatment Plant, we will push out to another briefing, and the PEX item we'll push out to another briefing as well. So effectively, you have 2 items to go. So thank you, Downer folks, for your patience. I know you've been around Mangawhai working hard all day today, so thank you very much. And Annan will like to name you in to the council.
Yeah, Dion. Need another one? Are you right?
Use that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to introduce the Downer team. So I've got Dion here, Chris and Mark. So this is our first briefing. For July. It's a little bit late, Mr. Mayor, only because we've only just started 4 weeks in. But the intention is that every month, myself and the Downer team will come and present performance on the roading network, on the contract, looking back, but also looking forward. So we will be pretty much populating the presentation with more depth as we go through the next couple of months, noting that the first 3 months of the contract largely focused on making sure we just continue with our business as usual, but also doing a stock take of the roading network. So the team have been quite busy out on the network. What that will inform us is the state of the network, and then inform a program for the next 6, 12, 18 months, commensurate with the funding that will be finalised from NZTA come September. So we do have a presentation for elected members, Mr. Mayor, but just wanted to talk a little bit about the performance framework. So one of the things that we identified earlier on is that we did want to have a performance framework, and the intention of that performance framework is really not to sort of get the stick and whack people, but look for opportunities to improve. And so the performance framework that we've set up, we basically have two. We meaning my team, will assess the performance of Downer. This is on a monthly basis, but then Downer also have the ability to check our performance as well, because quite often the contractor's shortcoming is largely sometimes due to the client not providing information or things like that. So we just wanted to be quite transparent at both ends. But as I said to you, the intention is to flag early any issues, keeping in mind that we've got a list of panel local suppliers that we want to utilise as well. So that's part of the performance framework. So what I'll do is I'll let Dion go through the presentation. I think given where we are today, I'd be happy to take questions as we go.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Yeah, so it's been an exciting and busy month to get us off the ground, and so a lot has happened in a short time frame. So just to give you a sort of a executive summary, we established our new contract and team. Started on the 1st of July. The contract was signed on the 15th of July. We've established temporary offices for 6 months in Mangatoroto and planning to move into an office in Dargaville. It's the old Ford showroom. And then we, from the new year, planning to get an office up here in Mangawhai. We've employed 12 local staff and fully inducted to complement our team. We've established 3 grading crews, 3 patrol crews, various utes, signs, materials, cones, etc. We've set up various procedures, systems and process to manage the new contract. These are all, there's still a significant amount of work to do as we work through the challenges with the transition from the NTA back to KDC. So our current organisational structure, our team, it's myself leading, and then we do have our network assessments, inspectors doing the assessments down the side. We've got RFS coordinator, Caroline Biles. We've got our renewals manager with the teams underneath them. And we've got our maintenance operations manager, Mark, here, with our drainage, cyclic supervisors underneath all that, unsealed, as well as network inspectors. And then we've got our financing team on the side. So just going forward, we're working with KDC to see how we can map and optimize the responsibilities going forward as well. Health and safety, as mentioned earlier, all our new staff has been fully health and safety inducted. We've working our way through all the pre-approved subcontractors, getting them registered, health and safety inducted. 6 have been done this far. We've set up a weekly health and safety hot topic toolbox every Monday morning, which everyone attends at 7:15. We've rolled out 12 different safe working method statements across to all the teams, and we've had 1 health and safety audit for the first month. Right, our customer requests, the RFSs, first month has been quite busy dealing with a lot of reactive requests. The current network condition combined with the weather contributes to a number of RFSs during the month. Majority of these RFSs, as you can see on this chart here, are mainly unsealed roads and drainage issues. And it's been quite interesting because with the network assessment we're doing, there's quite a mirror, a picture starting to form here. So this far we've, the 3 senior network inspectors started on the 1st of July surveying the network for all the faults. And we've picked up over 1,500 faults for about 40% of the network. That's covered an area of, or length of 670 kilometers, about 40%, and 1,500 faults have been picked up. 550 of these are unsealed, and a big portion of that as well is related to drainage. So these faults have been assigned, they get a severity and a priority based on our visual maintenance intervention guidelines and asset management standards. So from this, once we finish, obviously the 3 months network assessment, we'd like to sit down with KDC, you know, obviously in line with the budget, come up with the best value of money for the network. So just going on to sealed maintenance roads, last year 60% of the reseals were completed, and 40% of these, the reseal sites from last year were deferred to this year. We've assessed these sites that have been deferred from last year, and we've done an estimate, and we need about $750,000 to do pre-seals before those sites can be resealed. A large amount of this year's sites will need to be deferred due to funding and time constraints. There's a risk of that. A lot of the network has waterproofing issues, we've noticed, and this can result in more potholes and pavement failures. Moving on to unsealed roads. As said earlier, we've got 3 grader teams on the network and graded over, up until the end of July, 155 kilometers, repaired over 2,500 potholes, and imported 680 cubes of metals for strengthening. Most of the unsealed roads lack a crossfall shape. That's hence getting all the potholes, because water doesn't get off the road. And a lot of the roads also have this page green metal on, which is not a good thing. A lot of the roads lack metal that there's nothing to grade, basically.
Sorry, I have a question on.
I love on the roads, think otherwise.
Yeah, sure.
On the page green stuff.
Yeah.
And we raised this matter in Regional Transport Committee and in council meeting. And we were given the assurance that there's nothing wrong with page green, came from South Africa or wherever. And now you're telling this is actually is causing significant potholes. So there.
No, not potholes, no.
Well, that's what it's saying. Use of page green means it's causing significant potholes and soft.
It doesn't.
Ice course, no?
No.
Doesn't.
So it doesn't have body, if I can give you, enough, it's got a high PI, so when it in wet conditions, it just turns to slush.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Why we're using it?
Well, you've identified the problem that we've identified early days, so let's move on. Now,
Yeah.
looking at this photo here, I can see what you're saying about
Yeah.
your right-hand photo, about the fact that you've got no water to run.
Yeah.
So what's your methodology for taking that and putting it to an acceptable level?
Yeah, so the isolated areas where there's poor drainage and a lot of potholes, we actually rip and reshape the road and compact it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can leave that material on there that adds something on top and still get a road, or what do you have to do with the page green?
Instances, we need to add a bit of metal.
And punch it.
And
punch it in.
Yeah. So, and that's solving the issue, going to just temporarily do unsealed pothole repair is going to blow out in the first rain.
Yeah.
It's because the shape is not correct.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. No, that's good.
Yeah.
I just want to commend you if
No.
finding it out. But that was the issue all the constituents were talking about and nobody was listening.
Yeah.
So good on you. Thank you.
Okay, carry on.
Onto it.
And then obviously just the drainage and is an issue which needs addressing. It takes on to the next one, as I've just stated. You can't underestimate the value of spending money on drainage. That just adds the longevity to the network. Water destroys roads. So yeah, we've packaged the worst areas that have come through RFSs, and we've packaged them to be efficient to go out. We don't want to be just killing fires, and we've done an estimate and we've presented it to KDC to get onto it. And it's actually vital that we get onto it as soon as possible, because we can actually run into more costs and damage if we don't. On the Renewals Act, 21 kilometres as stated was deferred from last year, and as mentioned, we need about 750,000 for pre-seals before we can do the reseals this year, and we just need budget guidance and confirmation with the team
Just
as soon as possible.
Just a question on that one, Dion.
Yeah.
This is 750K. Is that in a budget, or is that going to be additional?
Yeah.
It is it.
I guess what you've got, just if I can jump in there, is you've got a confirmed, well, almost a confirmed budget from the agency for the next 3 years. So, we have to work within that budget. So we're going to have to shuffle stuff around to spend the money in the right areas.
Yeah. That's cool.
So this process you're going through now is the critical thing about it, I guess, identifying the issues and then prioritising which ones you do first and how you move through. Yeah.
All right, that takes us.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just on that, I just see, you've got Mingway Road here for the renewal, one of the renewal sites.
Yes.
I drove through there the other day and I just wanted to say that it's awesome.
Yeah.
It was so, pothole, you couldn't actually dodge the pothole, and usually that would just get, stuff put in the top of them and left, but you've actually cut it out and done it all nice and properly. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's do it right.
We've had, just to add on to that, it's not all roses. We've got a lot of work to do as a team, but we've had some good customer feedback. Mark can actually share 1 or 2 stories, so it's positive. Mark, you've
got a lot of new friends out in the network. Of me, especially for local, one of the roads in particular, Swamp Road, then Wayne Pascoe out there. He hasn't seen a grader on that road for 2.5 years.
He's a discerning man too.
Yes, yeah. He's your best friend, apparently.
Through the chair, just another clarification, sorry about it. Customer request, RFS.
Yes.
Request for service.
Yes.
So you had an subtotal of 125, open RFS 107.
Yeah.
So in terms of when you are treating them, are you actually looking at what is most urgent, or are you looking at what is most easier?
Most urgent as well, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, so this mix of 107 includes.
And there's some stuff that can get programmed to go back to later. It's not so urgent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so our aim is obviously, I know a lot of people when they complain, it's difficult to please everyone, but we're trying to engage with those customers so that you guys don't get all those calls. Linked to get to know the customers, and if they have a problem, they'll phone us directly. Like Mark, the likes of Mark, and he will get his team into the ground to get it sorted. So we're working on that.
I just have to butt in there too and say that I had 2 messages on my phone from Hilltop Road from people that had been ringing me personally and complaining. So it was really nice to see a result there.
I think that it's, if I may add, that it's very pleasing that in such a short time, we're receiving bouquets instead of brickbats, for you guys, so it's a good start. I'm interested in, and it's a leading question, your strategy for potholes. Because I was shown some more that I'm going to send photos to Anand about in Dargaville yesterday. And it's just amazing. I'm an absolute dummy. I got no idea about what to do, but I would never do, I think, what has been done over there. So I know Anne has talked to me about this, but what is your strategy for potholes?
Well, generally, it's related to a drainage issue. Always, it's most of the cases. I mean, if we look at Moyers Road here, where there's a lot of pavement failure, there is subsurface drainage issues, and the drainage needs to be addressed first. Yes, before you do anything. That's the most valuable money you could spend.
Yeah.
Getting the drainage sorted out first. Takes us on to the last slide of the performance framework, which I'll hand over to Chris. Chris will give us a rundown of the performance framework and will update us on that.
Yep, thank you. Through your worship. So I guess as Anna mentioned earlier, we've got a performance framework that's that we've developed specifically for the first 3 months. So it is just for that period, and it's all based around I guess initial response, making sure that we're getting programs up and running for this season, and specifically around the network assessment and the sort of collaboration and working in with councils. So as Enid mentioned, that we're there's an opportunity for us to measure one another and work through that collaboratively. So we're starting to do that now. We've got the performance framework in place, and myself and we'll be working on that in the future. So yeah, really I guess that's really where we're at from a performance framework point of view.
And that basically concludes the presentation. Yes.
That's right.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for coming and presenting to us. It was a really excellent presentation. For me, this is like night and day in terms of the difference in open, rational communication, and yeah, it's very, very refreshing. It's like a breath of fresh air. We didn't actually have any conversation at all with our contractor before. I am in a similar position to other councillors that have already expressed their thanks to, and I want to thank Jason and Annan and Leah also, who have done a huge amount of work in this area. I know that Blair is actively out on the network looking at defect issues and what have you, and I hope that's working okay with you guys as well. We have had people like Wayne Pascoe, who was probably pretty much ready to kill us, was so fed up with getting no service, and Mark's gone out there and sat down and had a cup of tea with him and been a real person and created a relationship and probably an advocate for Downer. So yeah, I think it's just really fantastic. In terms of this whole Page Green nonsense, I've been going on about it term and been told it's wonderful and it's this and it's a methodology and it's not a methodology and it's a da-da-da-da-da, on and on and on. We've been told that we have this wonderful system, and we've got the Centre for the Unsealed Roading Maintenance, which was my observation, a centre for unsealed roading embarrassment, quite frankly. And, you know, I couldn't get any answers. I just could not get the information until a month ago, even on what the required specification of the aggregate was. Finally got it, and it was what I thought. Far too soft and far too clayey. Why have we been putting this on our roads? It's just unbelievable. So, yep, we've certainly got some stuff to fix. And I'd just like to say to you guys, you all look like you're burning the candle at both ends. We've got a lot to fix. Take it easy on yourselves. We really appreciate your effort. It's really fantastic. And let's give them a round of applause, I reckon.
Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just absolutely endorse, none of us ever want to get ahead of ourselves, but absolutely endorse what Councillor Larson said, and we've started, and actually he did right. Sharing your time here with us is actually really a revelation. So, other than saying take it easy on yourselves, I think that to me the biggest challenge you got now is going to be settling into standard and keeping your standards, and keeping those standards might end up with some discussions about budgets and things like that at the end of the day. And I would say that we're a council who we don't have we don't have any spare, let's say it that way, but, you know, we'd rather hear from, or I'd certainly rather hear through you directly or through Arlen, where there is an issue. And so we don't take shortcuts and create a worse situation. So that's part of the standards as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
You
finished, have you?
Yeah, I think I'll give you opportunity now.
I was going to say you wanted to quit while you're ahead. Because I was going to say there's an election coming up and I'm going to be driving all those roads again.
So there's some good, you know, with the Page Green, it's not all bad because you've got an asset there that just needs some clever managing. You know, you can add in some, there's options, you know, some good metal to blend into it. There's the likes of polymers that can be added. We can do some trials, and so there are solutions. We can work with the team.
It is a great binder.
Yeah.
That's my biggest with that, is binding.
Binding, but you need body to it.
Binding in those substances.
Yeah. So
I don't want to chip in, but I will one more time. I just want to say, let's keep the communication open. And if there are things that you guys need from us, let us know too. Don't hesitate, because, you know, we might need to move budgets around. You might need us to help reprioritise things, and we don't know about it. We can't understand why and know how to help. So just let's be dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, very good. Rural Stop Bank project upgrade.
Is it, Anna's going to deliver that? And it's the last one, councillor Nath?
Tax maybe? No.
Yeah, please. I've moved on, I explained before that, it's the last one.
Thank you.
Including the PEX items.
Very big day.
Oh.
All right, thank you.
Been on the case.
All good. Okay, thank you, Arnold.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to take the opportunity to briefly brief the elected members on the Rural Way Stop Bank project. So it is a project that was on top of our risk register. It's in Rural Way, and the project involves essentially building and repairing or increasing the height of the existing stop bank, but also building an extension of the existing stop bank. And the whole purpose of that is the existing stop bank that is there was built many, many years ago. It's not fit for purpose from an engineering standard perspective. And if it was to fail, it would cause flooding of the Rural Way Township, State Highway, our assets, pardon me, etc. So a project was approved through council to do the work. Now, as the works proceeded, we had knowledge of a budget overrun, and therefore I drafted a paper to the Raupo Drainage District Committee meeting earlier this month, only to find the day before that my recommendation would have changed as a result of getting further information overnight. So I elected to withdraw the paper, notified the chair, he was happy with it, and we need to go back through the committee through an extraordinary meeting, but also brief this council. So where we're heading, Mr. Mayor, is we've had a technical review done on the project, but I'm getting an independent review done alongside the internal audit that we're doing on procurement as well. So we've added the Rural Way project into the that procurement audit that's going on. At this stage, I can't advise the amount, because we're still going through and identifying the budget overrun. I can just say that if you do read the paper that I put to the Raupo Drainage Committee, it is more than what I had first indicated to the committee. So So what'll happen, Mr. Mayor, is we'll finish that review. That'll highlight or identify where the issues were and recommendations forward. Then need to do a paper to the extraordinary meeting of the Raupo Drainage Committee, basically penning attaching the recommendations, and then also proposing a recommendation in terms of how it gets funded. I then propose to bring this back to the September council briefing with an update of that of the review, but also feedback from the Raupo Drainage Committee, and then come back to the end of council meeting, end of the month in September, to get a formal recommendation on how the funds are available. I just wanted to put a little bit of a cautionary tale in there, Mr. Mayor, that our internal auditor, or our person that's doing the reviews, only got about 2 weeks before the agendas align. So I am in discussions with her as to whether we can get a draft review done in the next 2 weeks, which will allow me to have that extraordinary committee meeting, but then also enough time to put forward to the September, noting the agenda goes out 5 days before the meeting. So today is just really a heads up in terms of projects gone over. We are doing an independent review that will identify findings and recommendations, and then there's a conversation that I need to take through the Raupo Drainage Committee in terms of how this gets funded. Obviously, I'll put a recommendation forward how that's done, and then come back and present their recommendation back if they accept it or wish to modify that back to council with a view of getting it finalised in September. The other thing too, Mr. Mayor, is that we are in flight. We basically near completion, probably about 90%, but there's just some winter works that we have to do. And if we don't do them, we're going to be in breach of our resource consent, and we would potentially get an abatement notice. So whilst we are exceeding the approved budget, it's prudent that we do this work. Otherwise, we're just going to get an abatement notice and have to do the work.
What way would we breach is that for self-control or?
Yeah. So
on those banks, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So we've got to put some topsoil in hay. So I've been in discussions with our chief executive, and we have approved a sum of money to complete the winter works. But again, just noting to elected members that it is over and above what council had approved, but we have no choice but to do it. So we've made that management decision to get on and do that. We'll come back in summer with the reinstatement and making good and removing out. But by that time, council would have approved the increase in the project budget, allowing us to complete the summer works. But we have expedited the winter works, Mr. Mayor, otherwise we'll be in breach of our consent.
Thank you, Councillor Noah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two questions. One obviously on funding. So do we have any approved funding? Because Raupo stock banks, we did have some funding available, right?
Yeah. So
you still need to come to council for?
Yeah. So we had, council had provided $590,000 of funding. We also got 280,000 from the government.
Yeah.
One of the funds from the government, making a total of 870. We've exceeded the indications are what the indications are. That budget has been exceeded just through the nature of the works, but potentially some other issues, and that's the whole purpose of the audit. It will identify, how did this occur? Could we have recovered? So again, that's the whole purpose of the audit.
The second thing is on this technical independent report you got, which identified a core issue with the stock banks that they have to be placed, right? Was it peer reviewed or is it just one person?
No. So, Councillor, the recommendation to goes back to 2018. It was done by WSP, and hence why it's sat on as one of the top risk registers. So, the independent review identified, the assessment by the consultant identified that stop banks needed to be either repaired or a new stop bank provided. So the most economical solution, and it's been a bit of a journey since 2018, was to put a new, build the existing stop bank and increase its length to protect the district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Howard.
Thanks, Alan. Really good. Actually, I can report that I was impressed to note at about 8 o'clock last night that they were working as they headed home. So, you know, there was all sorts of bright lights and things moving there. So, appreciate you. This is probably a delicate matter and you've got your independent review. But are you able to share anything with us about the nature of what's happened? And did the Raupo Drainage Board, do they are likely to have the funds to cover this overspend?
I probably will be better off answering both those when I get more information, one from the technical, sorry, not technical, the independent review that's going on. But more importantly, I have to have the conversation with the Raupo Drainage Committee prior to making comment on that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks for briefing us on that, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, team. Thank you, Lana.
So thank you, Anand. That is it.
Is that the end of the end?
It's a wrap.
Thank you. Can we hit the button?